Welcome back to the I4 intervention. We're here with day 2 with Katie Ford and going to be talking about breaking it down and getting through imposter syndrome. Remember, you are enough.
First of all, thank you all so much for giving me the most precious gift that you got, which is your time and being here with me today, and for showing up for you if you felt like an imposter before, because I'm going to explain that I've certainly felt that way too, and that's why I am so passionate about this. Now, we don't have a huge amount of time. If anybody that knows me will tell you that I could talk on this topic for hours, but I'm going to try and make this as succinct and as useful and as actionable as we can do. So rather than diving too much into what imposter syndrome is and where it's come from, we're going to look at what practical, tangible tips can we take today so that if we are feeling a little bit like frauds, that we can grab a pen and paper, do them, and actually help us move forward with this as well. So I'm going to take you on a little bit of a trip through that, what we can do, and also tell you a little bit about me as well. So the important question really, why am I telling you about imposter syndrome? Well, this is the background that most people see when you see conference proceedings and people give introductions. They'll say, I graduated in 2012 from Liverpool University in the United Kingdom, that I'm a small animal vet, that I have an extra certification in internal medicine, that I'm a coach, a mentor, a speaker, now an author, I have a sizable social media following, I own a business, but importantly, I'm a human being. And the story behind all of this that you see on this slide here really is the most important part of all of this. I don't have long enough to go into full detail on my story here, and that's certainly something that I do on a lot of my other talks. You'll find it online if you follow me on social media. I'm very open and very real and very authentic, because behind this huge screen of qualifications here, I felt like a massive fraud. I graduated from university, and whilst I was in the first few months quite forgiving to myself being a recent graduate, I then started to think, stop asking other people for help. You should know this. This little gremlin appeared on my shoulder, pressurizing me to know the answers to every case. And if I ever went and asked somebody else for help, or looked in the textbook, or spoke to a specialist, it will pipe up, oh, anybody could have done that. You only got that right because you spoke to so-and-so. And then maybe you need to go and get some more qualifications, go and get a certificate, and then you'll feel like a good vet. And I got one, and then lo and behold, nothing changed. And for me, this feeling was chronic and ongoing and led me to work longer hours, not want any other vet or doctor to see any of my cases because I thought they'll realise that I don't know what I'm doing. The more accolades that I got from the outside, I looked like a very accomplished veterinary surgeon. I'd got a big following of clients. I got very good case outcomes. I was working with the local radio. I do all the client evening presentations. I had so many gifts, cards and flowers, yet every time I got one of them, I'd open the card up and want to shake it out and be like, is there a complaint in here? Have they finally figured out that I don't know what I'm doing? And I tried moving around so many external things for a long time, and it didn't help me. And I really got to the point where I just was in a very dark place with imposter syndrome. It progressed past that to anxiety, depression, sort of self-hatred really, because I honestly thought, what is ever going to make me happy? I've got all these things that I thought would make me stop feeling like a fraud, yet it's not done anything. And through my own journey, through therapy, coaching, learning methods that really did transform my life, I started to realize that first off, I wasn't the only one that felt this way. Secondly, that imposter syndrome had been the start of it all, and I just never knew that it existed. I looked at everybody out there with certificates, with diplomas, being specialists, and looking like they had it all sorted. So that little gremlin on my shoulder used to pop in and say, it'll be okay when you get to that point, because that's the end goal. Yet as I got to each end goal, nothing changed. And when I went through that process and realized that actually I was enough and I was valuable, and my life that had been this performance related experience for so long, actually I'd been looking in the wrong place, and my value was there all along. I'd been looking here, and actually it was just here right away. I started sharing my story on social media just to give some solidarity to people and say, hey, look, this is how I felt. This is what the process was when I went through cases. This actually turned me into quite a snappy and horrible person to work with because internally I was in a civil war with myself. And people started coming to me saying, Katie, we felt the same way. Oh my goodness, we felt the same way. And that really snowballed into me speaking at lots of different conferences across the globe, growing a media following, but most importantly, wanting to keep sharing the story and opening the conversations on imposter syndrome so that people could recognise it earlier than I did do. Because I went on for years staying in practice longer and longer hours and trying to cover up and disaster prevent and stop anything ever happening. But my whole worth as a human was attached to my outcomes as a vet, which meant if a case went badly, I'd feel terrible. And that meant I never wanted anything to go wrong with cases because I just couldn't face the pain. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of why I'm so passionate about this topic, because I really think that I want to use that pain and that discomfort and all those years for something good, because I've seen there's another side to it. And I get so many lovely messages on a weekly basis just saying, wow, I thought I was alone. Thank you for opening this up. So that is a background to me, and that is the real reason why I'm here talking to you about this. I could go fully into my story, but we just don't have the time. So we're going to go into a little bit more about imposter syndrome, though, so that we can open these conversations up as we've aimed to, and importantly, give you guys some tangible tips that you can do that have helped me on my journey that are very, very doable. We're going to start with a real tiny bit about imposter syndrome and what it is. But the reality is, if you're on this call, you more than likely already know and are familiar with it. The Oxford Dictionary definition is the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own efforts or skills. So regardless of whatever outcome that we end up with, we still have that little voice that pops in, or those thoughts that pop in saying, well, I didn't really earn it. It was a lot harder work than anybody else had to do. I only did it last minute. The classic line, I winged it. Maybe anybody could have done that. The reasons why I discount the compliments. And we really feel like outside everybody sees a different view to what we're thinking internally. So we know a little bit about what imposter syndrome is, and no doubt you've all experienced it at some point. So when people come to me and they go, oh my goodness, I've got imposter syndrome, like, what now? And I'll talk through all the options that I offer, but I just say, welcome to the club. They did studies where they said 70% of the general population in the US had experienced imposter syndrome before. And I was talking with Alyssa at the beginning of this in terms of those 30% that say that they haven't. Maybe, to be fair, it's just that they haven't reached a point where they've experienced it yet, or maybe they've just not said it out loud, because so many of us experience it. I felt like this too. This is why I'm so passionate about opening the conversations on this topic, as have many of your fellow vets, techs and nurses. Believe me, I've got, I think, 12,500 people on Instagram. Every time I put a poll out saying, have you experienced imposter syndrome? 99% or more will say yes. So we can't all be frauds. Just know that to begin with. This is sometimes a normal experience. Imposter syndrome is the realm of the high achievers. It doesn't make it more comfortable when it happens, but at least we can say, whoa, I hear what this is, and I know this is imposter syndrome that has jumped in. Now time to take some of these steps. Specialists have felt this way. How do I know? Because I've coached them. Social media stars, the celebrities, university lecturers, whether you're a student now or back then, we used to think they were the oracle. Everything will be okay if I know as much as them. They'll still experience imposter syndrome at certain stages, particularly in growth, and particularly if they're given a new task they've not done previously before. Expert students and everyone in between. And it's okay. Doesn't mean that you're a fraud. So, and there are things that can help us, and that's what I'm going to touch on. But how do we actually define it? Because so many people will say, I've got imposter syndrome, and they'll own it as if it's a fault. It's not. It's an experience. And actually, it's defined as a psychological reaction to a set of stimuli. And quite frequently, that stimuli is growth, or stepping out of our comfort zones, or doing something that maybe is stretching our beliefs about ourselves a little bit. And that might be achievements. And we're going to go on to some of the times when that's come in. Now, although it's not a clinical condition, it can progress too, in the way that it did for me, things like anxiety and depression, because you can imagine if you're feeling not good enough and not worthy on a chronic basis, it can then lead into these other conditions. And that's why I'm passionate about talking about it early when these thoughts pop in, so that people can pull them up then and not believe everything that they do think. So it's an experience that we go through. It's almost like going through a type of weather. Like, okay, I'm feeling a bit impostery at the moment. It's not me. I know it's going to pass. There are things that I can do to help with it, but I'm not going to think, oh my goodness, I'm an imposter forever. So it might show up during exams or achievements, if we've got a new job or when we're graduating, when we've got a new qualification, so a certificate or a diploma, or if we win an award or a promotion. So like we say, quite often during times of growth. And some people out there will say, oh, I love it when imposter syndrome comes in because it means I'm growing and it's fantastic. It still feels uncomfortable, you know, but it doesn't mean that you're a fraud. So let's look at that feeling a bit differently. Maybe we're going against some beliefs that we never chose about success, or we're worried about failure more than we need to do. And perhaps that's why imposter syndrome is piping in, because we've just not internalized that success properly, or we've not realized quite why we deserve it, because our attention has been taken away to all the reasons why we don't. So the most important thing I'd take away from this is that it's not a fault, it's not a diagnosis, it's not a I've got imposter syndrome, it's a okay, I'm experiencing a bit of imposter syndrome at the moment, rather than it being a label that we give to ourselves, because labels can be dangerous, we know that. The most important reminder I give you of all of this is we don't have to believe everything that we think. There were studies out there saying that human beings on average have between 12,000 and 60,000 thoughts per day, and nearly 95% of those thoughts were repetitive and 80% of them were often negative. A thought is just a little process in our brain, a little biochemical process that goes off. And so many of them are put through a filter of beliefs that we never chose. And those beliefs were formed through things that were repeated to us all the time, or perhaps happened with some emotion. So we might frequently be told that you're only a success at something if you can do it on your own, or if you can do it quickly and easily, or failure is scary and failure is bad, or all of our value and our worth is put on grades and outcomes and achievements. And actually all of those beliefs were put to us with very little evidence in the first place. And this is when we say, look, I don't have to believe everything that I think. I think of it, and you'll hear me talk about this on Instagram, as having a little negative voice that was written for us without our knowing in the background that will pipe up and say you're a fraud. All the news is you're not the fraud, that voice is the fraud. Nobody invited it along, and we don't have to believe it. We can't always choose the first thought, but sometimes we can choose the second one. But underneath all of those thoughts and beliefs that we never ever chose and didn't have any input to, and many of them formed before we were sort of 10 or 12 years old about how that we see the world, and that subconscious filter, because remember, our brains are constantly taking in billions of pieces of information, and we have to filter it down into what's important to us, and often that's done for us without our knowing, based on these filters that formed without us knowing. So when we take all that away, there's an incredible, unique, valuable person under there. And if at any point you don't feel that, it's normally that little voice popping in, oh, well, you're not valuable enough because you've not had enough bitch space under your belt, or you're not valuable enough because you don't have enough letters after your name. Our value is still in there. You're enough. They did studies out there where they were working out just the odds of us being born as humans, and it worked out at 1 in 400 trillion when they looked at the odds of your parents meeting, them having a child, them being together, gamete formation and so on. And that was only your generation, like nobody behind you. And that's the same as a coin being tossed 30,000 times in a row and it landing on its edge every single time. Like there's 7.8 billion people on this planet and there's only one you. Yet we're constantly wanting to compare. You can't compare unique, yet we keep trying to do that. And we keep exhausting ourselves by saying, well, they've got more letters after the name. And in that person's head, they're going, oh, well, they've got the family that I wanted, and they've got this and they've got this. To compare really is to despair. So under all those labels, thoughts and beliefs we didn't choose is a unique, valuable and deserving person in each and every one of us. And so often we're made to feel like frauds because we forget who that person is and what their skills and talents and uniqueness actually is. And sometimes we pursue other people's dreams because we feel like that's what we have to do. Like I've just said, trying to compare unique is exhausting. So when we do find ourselves comparing negatively, not comparing in terms of inspiration, but comparing in terms of expiration, I guess, then let's just switch our attention and remember, like, they're doing a great job at being them. Let's do a great job at being us. And you're much more than your job title. I wish somebody had come along and told me these gems, because I constantly put myself on a pedestal of being a vet and my whole value sat on that. But you are valuable. Like, there's a gift in being. Like, we're special at a level of being, not doing, yet we all get so swept into what do we need to do and do and do. And it's okay to fail. We learn by trial and error. And what if we are growing? What if this feeling is popping in because actually we're stepping outside of the comfort zones, that we're almost rattling the cage of that little negative voice that's saying, oh, you don't deserve this. Here's all the reasons you should get back in your comfort zone. As humans, we're quite resistant to change. So bearing all of this in mind, what I'm going to do for you now is get you to get a pen and paper. And any time that you're feeling a little bit like an imposter, a nice exercise to do is these 10 points. And they're just nice reflective points where you can ground back to being you, that 10 out of 10 special, unique person that doesn't need to do anything to be that person. And when you treat yourself that way and you zone back into that person, it's so much easier to go out there and do all the things that you choose to do, because you cheerlead yourself. We adopt that growth mindset where we're kind to ourselves. So grab your pen and paper, and these are our 10 points. So the first one will seem a little bit scary, but I tell you, it is useful. Whatever you're approaching that you get an imposter syndrome about, visit the worst case scenario briefly and have a plan. You know, that little voice pops in and says, what if this happens and this happens, and you end up living as if it's actually happened. Well, just step back and say, right, okay, so let's just for a few minutes imagine that did happen. What would I do? Who would I ask for help? What would actually be the next step? What if actually it could be better? What if maybe not getting that job that I'm going for the interview for, that I'm feeling like a fraud about? What if there was something better around the corner? So we're saying here, bonus points if you can make both outcomes favourable. But everybody's path varies so much. You're on your own individual journey. And that's another thing to embrace. So many people like, oh, that's what they're doing with the comparison trap. Just think about what you want to do. And we'll come to that in a minute. And remember that failure is an opportunity, and there's information in it too. So when that little voice pops in and says, oh my goodness, what if this happens? Number one, gives us a backup plan. So we say, right, okay, well, if I fail this exam, I'll just resit it. I've already been there. I realise that it's okay. It might not be the initial thing that I wanted it to be, but perhaps I'll learn it twice as much. Good vets have failed exams before. We've been through worst case scenario. And then we demystify it, because otherwise fear of failure is a massive driver of imposter syndrome. The second thing, a really important thing, is list 3 reasons why you are choosing to do whatever you're doing. And if it starts with to prove myself, then we need to go back and we need to realign with our values and what's important to us. So zone into your why. It's so easy to forget the reason why we're actually wanting to do something in the first place. And there's a lovely quote that says, if you're trying to improve yourself for the wrong reasons, sometimes you can end up harming yourself. And I've been down that track many times. I did a lot of self-development of making massive goals and trying to prove to the world that I deserve to be here when actually I had nothing to prove. And it was so much easier to go out and do the things that I wanted to do when I had a good, strong, authentic, real why that really aligned with me. So list 3 reasons why you're choosing to do it. Know your values. There are loads of values exercises out there. Don't be afraid to change your mind. It's your path. But just spend some time aligning with why you're actually doing it, because it's so easy for us to get off course and be doing it for someone else. The third point is listing 5 reasons why you do deserve it. You know, our brain is very good at finding all the reasons why we don't. We've got a very special part of our brain called the reticular activating system, which filters information. And the way that that works is, imagine that you were buying a new car. This is a classic example they always use in self-development. And you say, I want a red Ford Fiesta, and you're looking at them on the internet and you're looking at loads of different ones in the car magazines, and you're on the road, and then you think, my goodness, there's these cars, they're everywhere, they've got so common. It's not, it's that part of our brain that has just picked out that information as being important to you. You've been consciously putting your attention to it. Same way that it worked for our ancestors when they were trying to stay away from saber-toothed tigers. It would like scan the horizon for threats. It's doing that in terms of if we feel like a fraud and we start focusing on all of our failures as being a bad thing and all the reasons why we don't deserve it, our brain will go ping, 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 ping. Here they all are. So that's when we can consciously guide our focus back and say, no, here are the facts. Here are the 5 reasons why I do deserve this. And as a bonus thing, as a top tip that can help retrain that part of our brain is to save our wins daily, like 3 to 5 things that went well that you had a part of, that then you can consciously look back on the day and say, okay, well, actually, you know what, years back, I would have been terrified of doing this bitch spay and I've done it. Or perhaps going to that person's visit to their farm would have been petrifying for me, but I did it. I got nice feedback from here. They don't need to be Oscar wins, but doing that can just help tune your brain to say, you know what, actually, I did a good job and here are all the reasons why I do deserve it. So that's number 3. Number 4 is list 3 to 5 strengths that you'll need for this and where you've used them before. And these don't have to have been as a vet. These can be everywhere. So these can be in sports. It might be that you need to show some leadership skills and you say, you know what, I was a brilliant leader when I was on the hockey team, or maybe it's that I need to show confident. Well, actually, I was really confident when I was speaking at this family event, when I was giving a speech at a wedding or something. Just think, you know what, those skills are there. When we align with our strengths, amazing things happen. And if you're not sure on your strengths, ask your friends and family. Think about what you get complimented on and what you do well. Because when we're frauds, we suddenly think that we don't have any strengths at all. But actually, we forget this huge mountain of strengths that we're stood on. So this point number 4, will help you just think of, what are my strengths? And to believe people when they tell you what your strengths are. Yeah, that little voice that jumps in, because it does the same for me. When someone says, oh, you're a good speaker, Katie, and I go, you're not really though, it's just an act. But it's not an act. This is just how I choose to come out and speak to you. Number 5, this is one of my favourite ones. When we feel like an imposter, as much as people out there will try and make us enjoy it and say, you know what, it's just growth and it feels great. I've been there, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you think, oh my goodness, I'm so nervous, and I can try and reframe it as excited, but it's not really working so much today. This is when we need to be the kindest to ourselves. Like, think about what you'd say to your best friend. And I've put here, ask friends and family and believe them, but would flick that the other way. What would you say to them? And say the same to yourself. And what kind of actions can you take to look after you? If you are feeling a little bit wobbly, a little bit off kilter because you're listening to that narrative telling you all the reasons why you don't deserve it, and you're starting to tune into the things that tell you why you do, because the things we listen to most often are the easiest to believe. So let's start piling in some of the kinder thoughts to ourselves too. But what 3 physical actions, whether that's you're going to give yourself a break and some rest, whether it's that you're going to go and do something that you enjoy, whether it's that you're going to ring and reconnect with someone, just think, what am I going to do to be kinder to me when that little internal narrative sometimes wants to beat us up and say, you don't deserve this, here's all the reasons why you don't. Number 6, this also just because of the power of our thoughts, like our thoughts lead to our feelings, lead to our actions and our results, and it's all a big cycle really. And when we've got those 60,000 repetitive, 95% repetitive, 80% negative thoughts, quite often it can make us focus on the wrong thing. So let's drag our attention back to something that will serve us well. And in this circumstance, let's ask, when did I last do something that I didn't initially think that I could do? Because when you're feeling a bit like a fraud, all those thoughts are piling in about all the reasons why you can't do it and why it's not going to work. So just go back to, okay, I didn't think I'd get into vet school, but I did. I didn't think that I'd pass that exam, but I did it. Even go to stuff outside of work. Like, I didn't think that I'd ever be able to do a pull-up at the gym, but oh my goodness, I can do one. Feed off that remembrance of the growth and the journey and the fact that you did it. Number 7 is ask who and how I choose to show up. And what do I mean by that? So often we've been given an identity that we didn't choose through the years, of beliefs about ourselves that people have told us, like, you're just not that confident and all these things. But instead, remember, underneath that is that completely unique 1 in 400 trillion, 10 out of 10, enough unique person that's special at a level of being, not doing. And how would you choose to show up as that person? Do you want to go in and say, you know what, I'm going to go in and be about being kind and encouraging to everybody else and realize that I'm going to do the same to me too, regardless of what happens? Am I going in prepared to realize that I don't need to get everything right and that sometimes there are going to be things that don't go well? But the important thing about a mistake is learning from it, or knowing that it's okay to ask for help in the first place. Am I going to go in as the one that's enthusiastic and interested? And am I going to go in with a smile on my face? Our identity and who we treat ourselves as is very important. And so often we've been given an identity that we never chose. So just think, who and how would I choose to show up to this? And that's not you being a fake, that's you tuning into you and saying, you know what, actually, I'm going to go in, I'm going to be kind, I'm going to be forgiving to myself. And yeah, our attitude and our actions are always in our control. There's often a lot that's not in our control that we spend a lot of time trying to control. But actually, let's focus on what we can control, which is our actions and our attitude. And some things are in our zone of influence. But for now, let's look at these things. Number 8, and I'm aware we're getting a little bit shorter on time here, but we've already done number 1, which was go to worst case scenario. So when that little voice pipes in and says, what if this happens? You say, no, it's cool. We've got that. Like the end scene of a movie. Just imagine, no, we already know that if that happened, this is what we do. So that's cool. Let's get the better scene, the scene that we'd ideally have. Let's visit the best case scenario. And it's not, oh my goodness, don't get excited, it might never happen. It's why not get excited about it? We only do it for a feeling anyway. Get excited, put yourself in the right headspace for it, put yourself in a good vibration. Use visualization. Visualization has been so proven in many sports, in lots of neuroscience papers with regard to our brain not knowing the difference between something that's actually happened and something we've imagined. So if you're going to an interview or you're going to a presentation or you're going into work and you're feeling like a bit of a fraud, visualize it going well. And it's not so much about what happens externally, it's about who you're showing up as, and think, you know what, I'm going to close my eyes, spend 5 minutes just saying, right, okay, I'm calm, I'm in control of what I'm in control of, I'm smiling, and it sounds ridiculous, but there is so much evidence behind it. Go and look up the basketball studies in terms of visualization and you'll be amazed. And it actually works. I do visualization a lot, and I'll tell you, it sounds a little bit woo-woo, but it actually is brilliant. So allow yourself to imagine what it would feel like and put those feelings in from the beginning to get the things out that we want. Number 9, and this unmasks that belief that so many of us have been given that we never chose, that we have to do everything on our own with speed and with ease. We're going to ask, who could I ask for help with this? If there's a task that you're worried about feeling like a little bit of a fraud about, or in general, how can you either speak to somebody else about it, whether that's a coach, a therapist, a mentor, a friend, a family member, or who is it that I could physically just ask for help? Like somebody that could teach me more, somebody that could make this task a little easier, because we're treating ourselves like we're growing, remember. It's okay, like we don't struggle on and try and grow on our own. We get other people to come and help water us and give us the things that we need. So ask that number 9, who could I ask for help with this? And then plan to take action on it. Send a text message, send an email, go and Google something, like actually physically go and take an action. And like I said, talk. Number 1 rule of Imposter Club is that we talk about Imposter Club and talk. Success is not always solo, and you do not have to know everything. I coach people that have got multiple specialisms and they still have felt like they have to know everything. And we're looking at them going, it'll be all right when I know everything. So remember, you don't have to know everything. And number 10 is, I want you to write down, I'm not an imposter. I'm valuable, I'm skilled, and I'm worthy, regardless of the outcome. And you can add in any other valuable reminders that you've had during this talk as well on the end and say, you know what, she said that too. I'm going to add that in there as well. Because that I am is so powerful, because our identity dictates our behaviors, it dictates our capabilities, it dictates how we treat ourselves, and nothing will ever exceed that relationship that we have with ourselves. So let's at least choose to be kinder to ourselves. The first thought might not, like that voice that jumps in now and says, no, you're not, well, you'll be worthy when. No, you're worthy now, and you're valuable now too, and channeling that person. So as I realise that we are running over, I'm going to come to the end conclusion here, which is, Look back at this list and put it somewhere visible and redo it a few times. Keep coming back to those 10 points. Treat yourself as this person because that is you. Those strengths, those values, that why, the reasons and things you've done before, it going well, being kind to you, that's you. Realize that feeling like a fraud doesn't mean that you are one. It might just mean that you're growing and you're pushing comfort zones. You're stepping out of comfort zones. And actually, if we back ourselves and we're kinder to ourselves, we make it a lot easier. We say, you know what, actually, you're a bit worried because you're worried that might not go so well. But actually, if it doesn't go well, it's okay. Let's see who we can ask for help to make that a little bit easier. And then we'll actually actively celebrate and look for those wins because that's powerful too. So my last slide, if you don't already follow me on Instagram, please do drop me a follow, and on Facebook too. I do have a little book that reminds people of these things. It's only short, it's a little gift book, but you'll find it there as well. And there are some free resources online that you'll find too, which there's a 1-hour webinar from eLearning Vet, which is just a bit longer. That's a UK one if you do want longer time. I have a free video on my website. And also if there are any students out there, if you go and track down Vet Student Wellbeing Week on Instagram, I did them a whole hour as well, and they're free to watch. So just remember, there are lots of free resources out there. I'm going to stop now because I've gone over, as promised, by 2 minutes, but I'm going to stop sharing. And I really hope that that was helpful to people and that you enjoyed that. And if there are any questions, as ever, please do get in touch with me because this is something that I'm super passionate about, realigning people with who they actually are, whether that's with coaching or online programs or just putting the message out there, because I spent a long time trying to find me in letters after my name and in case studies and in everything else, and I was looking in the wrong place. So awesome. I'll stop sharing now and stop waffling.
Not waffling at all. Thank you so much, Katie. I know we're a little bit over, and if those of you have to leave, please feel free to get back to what you need to do. I and Caitlin will hang out here for a little bit, and Katie's 5 hours ahead of us, so she is on Greenwich time. So thank you so much for being here in your afternoon and your evening, and I know I'm going to absolutely work on stop comparing my uniqueness. That point really hit home for me. So I am so grateful for your time and your expertise and your friendship. And I am so grateful to all of you that showed up here today. That's it, right? What did Katie say? You're here.
Yeah,
so,
thank you again. I was going to say thank you again for having me. First of all, on the other side of the pond. Secondly, yeah, thank you for being here, everybody, too, because, and it took me a long time to realize, but time really is our most precious thing.